Start with Keith.
Hi, Brad. At this time of year, approaching the trade deadline, how much harder does your job get as just kind of leading the team and having to answer questions from guys that really aren't related to game planning and things like that?
It can vary, I guess, year to year, person to person. If somebody wants to talk about that type of stuff, I mean, they usually don't talk about it with me as much as, if they have a question, they should go to Danny and talk to him about it. But sometimes it does get into, you're cognizant of the human element, that they're all paying attention and everything else. And I think these guys, maybe the rookies wouldn't be in this mindset, but I think most of these guys are, they've been kind of through the rumor mill so often that they don't, they don't pay it a lot of attention, or it doesn't affect them. Maybe they're paying attention, but it doesn't affect them. So I don't have a ton of those conversations. There's not a lot of, I think most of the guys handle it pretty well.
Angel Gray.
Thank you so much, Angel Gray, Fox Sports Ohio. Coach, thanks for your time. Just as far as keeping your guys engaged, what's been the message to them in their play, or what have you seen in their play, especially on the road?
Well, I mean, it's a weird year from the standpoint of going on the road and being together on the road. But I think, we're just trying to play as well as we can, home, road, in front of fans, no fans, whatever the case may be. So we've had better moments as of late, in the last 7 games or so. But, we haven't been as consistent as we'd like for a lot of reasons. But I think that at times we've shown ourselves to be capable. And so hopefully we can build off that. There's a lot that we have to improve on, Angel, that has nothing to do with the venue we're playing in or the opponent we're playing. It has more to do with how we want to play. Now, that said, every night in the NBA, you're playing other NBA players and other NBA teams. And if you don't do that well, you get beat. And so that's a challenge, obviously, anytime you're getting into these competitive arenas.
John Corrales.
Brad, they say that necessity kind of breeds invention, and this season has really been so unique. What have
I really said that, John?
I don't know if you've said that, but that's something that's kind of generally in the ethos, I think.
Yeah, just put me down as the person that said that.
We can put you down for that, sure.
Right.
But what have you learned? What out of necessity have you done as yourself or as a staff that you think maybe you could carry on and use moving forward in a normal season?
Well, I don't think we've gotten a chance to do it all yet. And so I think that's partly, what we're looking forward to when we're full, when we're unlimited, and all of those things. And so I think that our team is not as good at any one or two things like in years past. But we've tried a lot more and, played more defenses and tried a few things here lately that I do think that we can build off of and use if that time comes. Now, the deal is you have to be good at something. Like you have to be able to say, we as a team are really good on the offensive end at this, and we as a team are really good at the defensive end at this. And, of all the teams we've had, this team's had the hardest time probably becoming great at one or two things on each end. And so I think that's partly because we haven't had, the full roster intact very often. Certainly there's a lot of other reasons for that, but that's our task. Like, can we become able to identify, one or two things to really emphasize and hang on to and become great at while having some flexibility down the road. I think we have more flexibility at times, but sometimes, as you said, I don't remember how you said it, and I don't want to screw up my own quote. So, that's made us do things and try new things, which hasn't been all bad.
Last 2 questions for Coach. We'll go to Gary Washburn.
Hey, Brad, a couple days. One, any update on Tristan? Is it just going to be this maybe in the whole him and Romeo kind of the same thing? It's going to be another week or so, you estimate? And secondly, there was a couple of instances last night where I'm sure you wanted to use your challenge, but you had already used it on the play on Jalen. But then the play where Jason was called for charge against Jordan Clarkson. What goes into the decision making? And in a couple days ago, in Houston, you ran. There was a video screen back, and you ran in back of the bench to look at the play. Like in the Garden, doesn't really show replays. You look up and you see yourself looking up, seeing yourself. What goes into your challenges, and when and when not?
So there's a lot of things that you think about, Gary. There's a lot of things that you consider when to use those challenges. I certainly agree with you that, if I know that's not going to be overturned last night, then, you'd rather have that late. The day before, I thought Smart's impact on the game was so big that I wanted to be alert to his foul total. And I thought that, obviously when he came into the game, we looked totally different, and that game looked like it was heading in a totally different direction. But there's a lot of other things, like, there's some calls that just don't get overturned a lot. And, like those charge block calls, I mean, you can look at it and, make any determination you want and probably argue it for days after you watch the review. And so those just don't get overturned a lot, at least not from our perspective. And so there's a lot that goes into it. I usually listen to Matt pretty clearly, and he told me not to challenge last night. So if anything, that's a thumbs up for Matt, and he should be credited for actually saying, don't do it.
Final question, Jared Weiss.
Going back to your prior answer and that quote that we all clearly remember you inventing, most defenses in the I guess recent history, they were kind of defined as having their main pick and roll scheme, their kind of base scheme. But it seems at least the last year or two that there's been more virtue in just being as flexible in your scheme as possible. Do you think that's kind of become the new normal, that you don't have a specific scheme, but rather can just do every scheme?
I would say, Jared, I think, you can mess with all kinds of different schemes, mess with all kinds of different looks. I think everybody has a base system, and it's how much that you get a chance to play it, how much you get a chance to work on it, and how committed you ultimately are to it. And then you play from there. And 9 times out of 10, the adjustment, if it's not zone, is going to be to a switching lineup. And, a lot of teams have been really creative and have done this for a while, right? I talked a little bit about this on one of my interviews yesterday, like the late switch, the veer by the big as you're heading down into his chest with the guard, and the guard peels back and takes a big popping, has made it hard to be a good pick and pop big in this league. And that's really challenged some of those guys to adjust and get better if that was what they did best, because there's an answer there, right? But I think a lot of teams go to late switching, the veering, or they just go to 1 through 5 switching, and are able sometimes to hide their centers on bigs, and sometimes they don't play their centers. And you see that all the time. And so I don't think it's a ton of, like, there's only so many ways you can guard that. Now, there are some unique creative ways that are going on all over the world that we do some, but, I think will maybe be the next wave.
We'll wrap it up right there. Thanks, Coach.